What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so I want to talk about this again, this storm that's approaching Florida, in particular the western coast of Florida, Hurricane Milton. Now, yesterday, this storm reached a peak intensity of 180 miles an hour. And over the overnight period, I think what happened was the storm started having an eye wall replacement cycle where the storm underwent temporary weakening and it actually downgraded down to a high end category 4 storm with the winds decreasing to 140 miles an hour. But Milton has begun to re-strengthen. Once again, it's back up to category 5 status. As a matter of fact, in the last update, the last advisory, it was at 5 p.m. It had regained category 5 strength with winds of 165 miles an hour. So this is a monster of a storm. Now, the storm is forecasted to weaken as it interacts with, I think, a cold front that is sweeping the East Coast at this time, as well as I think because of that cold front, it's going to be some shearing in the system. So it's going to interact with that cold front from what I read from meteorologists, and the storm is expected to weaken. The question is, how much is it going to weaken? They think it's going to weaken to a category 3, maybe even a high-end category 2. But, I mean, that's a forecast model. Whether that happens in real life, we don't know. Now, I think the more pertinent thing right now is earlier the models were saying that it was looking more and more likely that the direct hit will be south of Tampa, which I think would be maybe the Sarasota area. But if you look at some of these latest models, the Euro, for instance, the last 3 runs of the Euro have Milton making a direct hit to Tampa, which would be catastrophic. Okay? Now, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not a meteorologist. Okay? I like the weather. I like to read about it, but I'm no meteorologist. So I want to play what this guy is saying right here in this area. I don't know if this is a Tampa affiliate. I know they're in Florida. It's ABC Action News. I don't know exactly where they are, but here they are right here.
That 5 p.m. update on Hurricane Milton just coming in, so we do want to start this half hour with Chief Meteorologist Dennis Phillips. Dennis, what's the new info at this point?
Not the greatest news. We now are back to Category 5 hurricane winds of 165 miles an hour. We talked about this yesterday. As this storm was going through what we call an eye wall replacement, what happens is it weakens pretty significantly for about 18 hours, and then it strengthens again. It's a bigger storm at that point. Winds of 165. It is now moving east-northeast, so it's feeling the tug of that trough we've been talking about at 9 miles an hour, and the pressure 918 millibars. So warnings remain the same for the entire area, hurricane warnings and storm surge warnings. The surge numbers are something that may need to be tweaked soon. And Shay and I and Allie, we've been kind of looking at the numbers over the last few minutes. We're going to see if the surge numbers from the NHC are beginning to hint at a greater threat to the south. Now, if you've been following me on Facebook, you kind of know what we're talking about. We've been seeing this for several hours. This afternoon, there was a wobble of this storm to the southeast. How many times as Floridians have we seen that happen? I mean, it's absolutely impossible to forecast where that and when that is going to happen. But we know with our experience that quite often you get these wobbles, especially as they approach Florida. And 9 times out of 10, those wobbles are to the right. Well, today, that happened. It was small, it was subtle, but I will use the example that I always use. So imagine you're driving a car and you're holding that steering wheel, right? and you turn that steering wheel just a little bit to the right, well, 100 yards down the road, it isn't going to change very much, your direction. But 200 miles down the road, it is. So that little subtle change, that little wobble has changed the track. The Hurricane Center has now nudged the track now down toward the south, closer to the Sarasota area.
Okay.
The margin of error, when you look at the cone, remember, this cone has nothing to do. There's no one at the Hurricane Center saying, well, let's make this cone a little bit bigger on this side and a little bit less on this side. All this cone is in terms of time, the average margin of error over the last 5 years. And it should be getting closer because we're now about 30, 34 hours out from landfall. So you would expect the margin of error to be lower. But I'll say this again. We as Floridians know these wobbles are going to happen. And there's not a model on Earth or a human on Earth, for that matter, who can predict where those specific wobbles are going to occur. But we do know, more often than not, they're a little bit to the right. So when we take a closer look at that updated track, this line was over Tampa Bay itself, the actual bay, at 11 o'clock. And now it is more south of Bradenton, between Bradenton and Sarasota. We're going to take a closer look at this, but I implore everyone watching this right now, look at the margin of error. Look at that cone of uncertainty. How many times in the last couple of decades have we gone on here and said, and I'll answer it, think of Charlie, think of Irma, think of Ian, heck, think of Helene. Because even Helene at the end veered a little bit to the right. Remember how Tallahassee was in the sights? We were all the live shots in Tallahassee, all the trees, everything was going to be rebuilt. And 6, 7, 8 hours later, that track had shifted a little bit, 30 miles to the right. 30 miles is huge in terms of how it would impact the Bay Area. If you get a direct impact right into the Bay, it's going to impact millions of people. If you get an impact a little farther to the south, it's going to impact hundreds of thousands of people. But the point is, I don't want these folks, and even Fort Myers, and heaven knows they know after Ian, you just have to remember this cone of uncertainty remains in play. But we also know that the normal error on these storms, the normal wobbles, are typically to the east and the south. So again, I literally just got this new track. I'm going to have a chance to go over and look at it. I'm not even sure necessarily if the models have updated in terms of the impact for us. But there's one thing that's really important. We've talked a lot about the shear, okay? Look at the rainfall totals north of the eye. 5, 6, 7, 8 inches of rain. Look at the area and the heavy rain south of the eye, significantly lower. The way this is going to set up when this storm moves in, the northern half of that eye wall is going to have a heck of a lot more rain than the southern half. I'm telling you, I think the southern half is going to be practically rain-free from the shear that comes in. But there's going to still be wind. Now, these numbers have nothing to do with the NHC's forecast. This is just a particular model run. And right now, I think it's pretty solid. So this brings by tomorrow night winds of, these are gusts, not sustained, winds of 50 to 60 miles an hour gusts. And then by about midnight to 2 a.m., you start to see the winds 80 to 90 mile an hour gusts. Pinellas County, Hillsborough County, 60. And then overnight, 2 a.m. to 6, 7, 8 a.m., you still, inland areas, pick up winds gusting 60 to 80. So, look, we're going to be talking a lot about this continuously. I'll be on Dennis Phillips Live tonight at 7 o'clock straight through, and I'll have a chance to just continue to talk and analyze area by area. But I think at the end of the day, here's my point out of this. We have a track that is shifting south. It is. Now, can it shift back north? Sure. Do I think it's going to? Unlikely. Because usually what happens, we'll say it again, when you get an unexpected wobble to the right, that's going to change things, and rarely do you get them shifting back in the other direction. It can, but the most important thing to remember as you look at these winds, here's your time frame again. We start to see tropical storm force winds in the mid-afternoon. We get the heavier winds, 58 to 73, gusting tomorrow evening. And then the hurricane winds come in around midnight. So we're going to have massive power outages. And even the northern counties, and this is where I don't want to have a mixed message. So I'm sure a lot of people at home saying, yes, if you live in Pasco County or Hillsborough County or Pinellas County, maybe the impacts of surge will be lower. And that is certainly true. But you are going to get some serious wind and some serious rain in that northern eye wall. So Pinellas and Hillsborough and Pasco, if this track verifies, and potentially it might even go a little more to the south by the 11 o'clock advisory, I still think there's going to be major impacts from power outages, maybe a little less with surge. In fact, I'll say not maybe. If this track verifies, surge threat will be lower for the Bay and for Pinellas County. It's still going to be surge. As the storm moves away, we are then going to get an onshore flow. But overall power outages, you can see them in the overnight hours, and it's the worst time. I get it. Everybody's like, why do these things always hit at night? We are going to have widespread power outages in the overnight hours on Wednesday night into Thursday. And then once it leaves to the right, it's going to taper off pretty quickly.
All right. So according to him, and he this is the meteorologist in that area. So he's saying that the track has shifted south. So I guess it's looking less likely that Tampa is going to take a direct hit. So it's going to be more Sarasota. And then he said it's a possibility that the track could shift a little further south than that. So, I'll keep a track on this throughout the day tomorrow, do a video on this tomorrow. Hopefully the storm weakens a lot so that by the time it does strike Florida, it'll be maybe a 2. But remember this, though, man. People forget when Hurricane Katrina struck New Orleans, it was a Category 3. So it wasn't even really the winds per se as it was the storm surge and the flooding. So it doesn't have to be a Cat 5 to do catastrophic damage. But he's correct. If the storm had directly hit Tampa, that would have been absolutely disastrous. This is still going to be bad. But anyway, man, if you live in Florida, in particular, I would say, and even with that, as he said, the cone of uncertainty, still be on alert, even if you live Tampa or further south, Sarasota, if you live in those regions, still keep a track on the weather. And I would guess, if you, hell, at this point in time, if you haven't evacuated by tomorrow afternoon, it might be too late. But I don't know. I don't know what to say. If you stayed, I guess you're just going to have to try to ride it out, man. But this might not be the type of storm that would be appropriate to just ride out. You know what I mean? I've heard a lot of people that are saying, well, the storm's supposed to weaken. So, but yeah, man, I guess if you live Charlotte Harbor, Inglewood, even that far south, man, just keep a lookout for the weather, man. But anyway, tell me what you guys think, man.
Cornbread.